History is not a straight line. It is a cycle of fire and rebirth, of destruction and renewal, of conquest and extraordinary resilience. On the wind-swept plateau between the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf, one civilization has endured for more than 6 millennia. While empires rose, fractured, and faded into dust, Iran remained resilient, continuous, unbroken. To understand the world as it stands in 2026, we must return to the beginning, to the moment when the dust first settled on that ancient, rugged land. This is not merely the history of a nation. It is the biography of an identity, one that refused to die. This is Iran. Our story begins around 4000 BC in the ancient city of Susa. Imagine a world where most of humanity still lived as nomadic tribes, moving with the seasons in search of water and pasture. And yet, here, at the edge of the Zagros Mountains, a different future was already taking shape. The Elamites were building cities. Not simple settlements, but organized urban centers, structured, deliberate, and alive with innovation. They raised monumental architecture that reshaped the horizon and crafted pottery so refined that its patterns are still studied thousands of years later. But their greatest achievement was not what they built, it was how they thought. They developed some of the earliest known writing systems, transforming memory into record and speech into permanence. They established vast trade networks that stretched deep into Mesopotamia, connecting cultures across distances once thought impossible. They created systems of taxation, law, and administration that would echo through history for millennia. Susa was more than a city. It was a pulse, the first proof that the Iranian plateau could sustain not just life, but complexity, order, and vision. Even then, 6,000 years ago, something deeper was taking root. Not just a civilization, but an identity, one that would endure. The Iranian plateau was never still. It was a crossroads where civilizations met, clashed, and transformed. Around 1000 BC, the horizon began to shift. From the northern steppes came a wave of Indo-European tribes, known as the Aryans, the noble ones. They brought with them horses, chariots, and a language that would one day evolve into Farsi. From these tribes, two powers emerged, the Medes in the north and the Persians in the south. For generations, they lived under the shadow of the Assyrian Empire, a force defined by conquest and fear. They waited for a leader, and then, in 550 BC, he appeared. His name was Kurush, known to history as Cyrus the Great. In little more than 2 decades, he achieved the unthinkable. He united the fractured tribes of the plateau and forged them into a single, unstoppable force. He did not just build a kingdom, he built the Achaemenid Empire, the first true super the world had ever seen. But what made Cyrus great was not how he conquered, it was how he ruled. When his forces entered the legendary city of Babylon in 539 BC, the world expected destruction. Instead, they witnessed something unprecedented. Cyrus issued a decree, recorded on what we now call the Cyrus Cylinder, often regarded as the first charter of human rights. He declared that all people under his rule were free to worship their own gods, free to speak their own languages. He allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem, ending their long captivity. In an age defined by brutality, Cyrus introduced something radically different, the idea of the ruler, not just as a conqueror, but as a guardian, a king who wielded power with restraint. Wealth and power always attract envy. By 330 BC, the Achaemenid Empire stood as the envy of the known world, a vast, sophisticated machine of governance and control. It was held together by an extraordinary innovation, the Royal Road. Stretching over 2,700 kilometers, it allowed royal messengers to cross the empire in days, not months, binding distant lands into a single functioning whole. But far to the west, in the rugged highlands of Macedonia, a young king was watching. His name was Alexander the Great, and he was coming, not just to defeat Persia, but to inherit it. He swept across the plateau like a wildfire, but his arrival at Persepolis would become one of history's most haunting moments. Imagine it, a city carved into stone, rising from a vast terrace, a symbol of imperial power and artistic brilliance. Its halls adorned with gold, its ceilings supported by cedar beams from Lebanon, its treasures gathered from the farthest reaches of the known world. And then, in a single night, it burned. In an act Driven by vengeance, pride, and intoxication, Alexander allowed the city to be set ablaze. Flames consumed the palaces. Peat twisted stone, gold and silver melted, seeping into the cracks of the earth itself. To those who witnessed it, it seemed as though Persia had been erased and empire reduced to ash. But they were wrong. The spirit of the Iranian plateau did not die. It endured. It withdrew into the mountains, into memory, into the people themselves, waiting. As Alexander's empire fractured under the ambitions of his own generals, something ancient began to stir once more. What had been destroyed began to reform, not as an empire, but as an identity. The Macedonians could occupy the land, but they could never possess its soul. From the ashes of Persepolis, a new force began to rise. This was the first great rebirth, the beginning of a pattern, one that would define Iran for the next 2,000 years. After the Greeks faded, the plateau rose once more. First came the Parthian Empire, unrivaled masters of cavalry warfare. These were not soldiers of the city. They were children of the wind and the open steppe. They turned speed into a weapon, developing a style of combat that left the heavy legions of Rome in a state of constant fear. This was the age of the Parthian shot. Picture the battlefield. At Battle of Carrhae, the Roman general Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, marches into the desert with 7 legions. He expects a conventional battle. Instead, he finds himself surrounded. 10,000 Parthian horsemen move like shadows across the Rommel. They strike fast, precise, then retreat as if fleeing in panic. The Romans take the bait. They pursue, and then the riders turn. At full gallop, they twist their bodies backward, releasing arrows with deadly accuracy into the exposed ranks behind them. Confusion becomes chaos. Discipline collapses into fear. This was not a battle. It was something else entirely. A war of illusion, a war of ghosts. That day, Rome's expansion into the east did not just fail, it ended. But history does not stand still. In 224 AD, a new power rose from the plateau, the Sasanian Empire. What followed was a renaissance. The Sassanids did not merely conquer, they rebuilt. They revived Zoroastrianism, a faith centered on a cosmic struggle, light against darkness, truth against the lie. These ideas were not abstract, they became the foundation of the state itself. For 4 centuries, the Sassanids stood as equals to the Byzantine Empire, 2 superpowers, locked in a cycle of war, diplomacy, and fragile balance. A conflict without resolution, a rivalry without end. They drained each other, slowly, relentlessly, unaware that beyond their borders, something new was rising. From the silent deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, a storm was gathering, and when it arrived, it would sweep both empires away. The year 651 AD marked one of the most transformative moments in Iranian history. The Sasanian Empire, weakened by decades of war with the Byzantine Empire, collapsed under the advance of Arab Muslim armies. The ancient fire temples fell silent, and across the plateau, a new sound emerged, the call to prayer. To the outside world, it appeared to be the end of Iran, but what followed was something far more complex. The conquerors had won the land, but not the civilization. The Iranians embraced Islam, but they did not lose themselves. They did not become Arabs. Instead, they adapted, reshaping the new world from within. Their greatest weapon was no longer the sword, it was the mind. As parts of Europe entered what would later be called the Dark Ages, a different story unfolded in the East. A renaissance, a surge of knowledge, innovation, and intellectual power. This was the Islamic Golden Age, and at its core were Persian minds. Consider Avicenna, a physician, philosopher, and scientist whose work, The Canon of Medicine, would shape medical knowledge for centuries, becoming a standard text across Europe and the Islamic world alike. Or Al-Khwarizmi, working within the legendary House of Wisdom, he did more than solve equations. He redefined mathematics itself. He laid the foundations of algebra and gave the world a word that still defines modern computation, algorithm. But preserving knowledge was only part of the story. Preserving identity was another. A poet named Ferdowsi took on that task. For 30 years, he labored to create a single work, the Shahnameh, nearly 60,000 verses, the longest epic ever written by a single author. Within it, he preserved the myths, the kings, and the memory of a civilization. He chose his words carefully, minimizing foreign influence to protect the Persian Persian language itself. Through poetry, he achieved what armies could not. He ensured that Iran would never be forgotten. In the end, Iran did not disappear. It transformed. It became the intellectual and cultural engine of an entire civilization. A reminder that while empires may fall, ideas endure, and identity can outlive conquest. By the year 1501, a new chapter began. From the turbulence of the past, a new power emerged, the Safavid Empire. At its center stood a teenage warrior, charismatic, relentless, and visionary. His name was Shah Ismail I. He did more than conquer land. He reshaped identity. By declaring Shia Islam as the state religion, Ismail drew a line, clear and unbreakable. To the west stood the Ottoman Empire. To the east, the Mughal Empire. Iran would follow a different path. This was more than politics. It was the birth of a distinct Iranian Shia identity, a force that would endure for centuries. That vision reached its peak under one man, Shah Abbas I, a ruler who understood that power was not only measured in armies, but in beauty, in culture, and permanence. He moved the capital to Isfahan and transformed it into one of the greatest cities the world had ever seen. At its heart, he built the legendary Nekshe-Jahan Square, a vast, symmetrical masterpiece of design, a space so grand it felt almost unreal. Around it rose wonders of architecture, mosques shimmering with blue tiles, bridges stretching gracefully across the water, bazaars overflowing with goods from distant lands. From China to Europe, travelers from across the world arrived and stood in awe. They could barely comprehend what they were seeing, and so they said, Isfahan is half the world. To walk its streets was to witness perfection. Geometry turned into art, stone shaped into poetry, gardens designed to mirror paradise itself. The Safavids did more than rebuild an empire. They unified a people. They restored a sense of Iran, not just as a place, but as a shared identity. After centuries of invasion and fragmentation, the phoenix rose again, stronger, more defined, more beautiful than ever before. As the 19th century unfolded, the world beyond the plateau began to change, rapidly, irreversibly. The Industrial Revolution had transformed European powers into vast, hungry empires, and Iran found itself trapped in the middle of a silent war, a geopolitical struggle known as the Great Game. To the north, the Russian Empire pushed relentlessly southward. To the south and east, the British Empire advanced from India. Between them stood Iran, not as a conqueror, but as a prize, a buffer state in a game it did not control. For the first time in centuries, the Iranian state felt fragile. Territories were lost, influence diminished. Humiliation became familiar. But the story did not end there. In 1906, the people pushed back. The Persian constitutional revolution erupted, a bold demand for law, representation, and a modern state. It was an attempt to reclaim control of the future, to reshape Iran from within. But history had another turning point waiting, hidden beneath the earth itself. In 1908, in the dusty hills of Masjid Soliman, everything changed. A discovery that would redefine not just Iran, but the entire modern world. Almost overnight, Iran transformed. No longer just a cradle of culture and history, it became a strategic prize of global importance. This black gold brought opportunity and danger. It promised modernization, but invited deeper foreign control. Global powers did not come for poetry. They came for energy, for influence, for power. And so the story of Iran shifted once again, from the age of kings and poets to the age of nifat, tankers, and hidden negotiations. The stage was set for the 20th century, a century of speed, pressure, and transformation, one that would test the very limits of Iran's immortal identity. In 1925, the old world was swept away. The era of the Qajar dynasty came to an end, replaced by a soldier with an iron will. His name was Reza Shah. He looked at a nation divided, weakened, and overshadowed by foreign powers and made a decision. Iran would modernize, no matter the cost. This was the beginning of a transformation. Rapid, forceful, uncompromising. Railways cut through mountains once thought impassable. The Trans-Iranian Railway stretched across the land, linking the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf. Steel replaced isolation. Movement replaced stagnation. But he was not just building infrastructure. He was building a state. Modern laws replaced feudal systems. A national bank was established. And at the heart of this new Iran rose the University of Tehran, a symbol of knowledge, ambition, and progress. Then came his son, Mohammad Reza Shah. If the father had begun the transformation, the son would accelerate it. By the 1960s and 70s, Iran Iran was racing forward. Some called it a new golden age, the great civilization. Tehran became a global city, a place of luxury hotel, avant-garde art, nightlife that rivaled London, New York. They called it the Paris of the Middle East. But beneath the surface, something was breaking. The rapid push toward westernization came at a cost. Millions were left behind. While the elite embraced modern fashion, wealth, and global culture, others felt something deeper slipping away. Identity, tradition, meaning. The reforms, known as the White Revolution, promised progress, but for many, they delivered dislocation. A growing divide emerged between palace and street, between modernity and memory. What had once been a gap became a canyon, and in that widening space, something dangerous began to form. Anger, resentment, revolution. The stage was set for an explosion that would shock the world and catch both the CIA and the KGB completely off guard. In 1979, the world watched in disbelief. A monarchy that had endured for over 2.5 millennia collapsed in a matter of weeks. The Iranian Revolution had begun. It defied every expectation. This was not a revolution led by generals or political parties. It was led by a man in exile, an aging cleric. His name was Ruhollah Khomeini. When he returned to Iran, landing at Mehrabad airport, history shifted. Millions flooded the streets of Tehran, a sea of black and green, a nation in motion. From that moment, everything changed. The Islamic Republic of Iran was born, and with it, a decades-long alliance with the West was severed almost overnight. But the revolution did not stop at Iran's borders. It shook the world. The seizure of the U.S. embassy in Tehran triggered a global crisis. For 444 days, the world watched as diplomacy gave way to confrontation. And then, before the new system could stabilize, another storm arrived. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein made his move. Believing Iran was weak, divided, vulnerable, he invaded. What followed was the Iran-Iraq War, the longest conventional war of the 20th century. 8 years of devastation. Trenches carved into the earth, cities reduced to rubble, chemical weapons staining the battlefield. For Iran, it felt like history repeating itself. Another invasion, another test. Young men, some barely more than boys, marched to the front lines, armed with little more than faith and belief. They called it the imposed war. It was brutal, it was costly, but it changed something fundamental. Out of destruction came resilience. Out of isolation came self-reliance. Iran was forced to build its own weapons, its own medicine, its own path forward. The immortal identity was no longer just history. It became survival, a living force, forged in fire and written in blood. As we stand here today, in 2026, the story of Iran remains one of the most complex and misunderstood on Earth. For decades, the nation has lived under heavy sanctions, cut off from much of the global system. And yet, look closer. The plateau has not withered. It has adapted. Its scientists launch satellites into orbit. Its doctors perform world-class surgeries. Its youth stand among the most educated and technologically capable in the region. But beneath these achievements lies something deeper. Iran exists at a crossroads, a place of contradictions, where ancient traditions like Nowruz endure alongside deep Islamic devotion, where a desire for global connection meets an unyielding sense of sovereignty. The people of this land are no longer just witnesses to history. They are its authors. They carry within them the legacy of poets who preserved their language and thinkers who reshaped the foundations of science itself. We began with a simple idea. History is not a straight line. It is a cycle. Iran has faced it all. Invasion, empire, collapse, and pressure from every direction. And every time it has endured. From the ancient city of Susa to the skyline of Tehran, the message has never changed. Empires fade, power shifts, but identity endures. This is not just history. This is continuity. This is Iran.